the SM Media Podcast Network.
Hi, folks, and welcome to the latest episode of the Rangers Assessment, your SM Media Rangers podcast. I'm Scotland Pike. It is a delight to be here, and for our first show of 2025, I will just say in advance, if you're looking for a happy, cheery podcast, this is probably not going to be the one for you. But if you're looking for a bit of a kind of detailed analysis into what's happening, then hopefully this is a good one for you. It's a pleasure to welcome as my first guest for New Year. It's a pleasure to welcome Dave Cornish.
Cheers, Scott. Good to be here.
I apologise, it's not better circumstances, but it is what it is. Let's just get into it. I think there's several things we can discuss here, right? We'll probably spend a bit of time talking about each one. If you'd said to me on the 2nd of January, Rangers would play 5 games, win against Celtic and not win any of the other 4, I would have said, well, that no matter the positive of the Celtic game, that results in the manager being out the door. That's not happening.
Yeah, 100%, mate. I think if you look at our recent history, obviously we had Beale, we've had Gio, both were sacked far, far less and further behind than what Clement is right now. Now, I think we all know that there's an element of downsizing going on around the club, but at the same time, I think we have to be realistic. You hear Clement going into these big games against likes of Celtic or Spurs, and he talks about budgets. Well, guess what? There's 10 other teams in the SPFL that would crawl over broken glass for his budget. So, yeah, it's a tough one. I think there's a lot of issues there, but for me, he absolutely should be getting more out of what we have.
The issue I've got here is, and this is where I get to stages with certain managers, and if people that have listened to podcasts that I've been on in the past, I always call it the Harry Maguire syndrome. Now, what I mean by that is you can see certain things that go on within a situation. We have seen with Rangers, particularly under Clement, there isn't a consistent body of work. There's been good spells, a very good start. It died a death after Motherwell last season. Then it got towards the start of the season where I think we all had a bit of sympathy for the card he was dealt in the transfer window. He then had a difficult start, lost 3 away games, and we were thinking, I don't think he's going to cut it here. Had a brilliant showing against Spurs and Celtic, despite not winning any of them, which we took positives from it. But I think a lot of people had made their mind up, but they'd been turned round in those games. Then the Dundee United game, and not the Dundee United game. Then you had the Motherwell St Mirren games after that, where you were like, Celtic come here and win, this is over. Beat Celtic, you think, right, there's positivity there. And then you've got the situation now. There will be spells where you'll look at Philippe Clement and go, he might be able to turn this round, but the next defeat it will just be the same thing. And that's Harry Maguire syndrome. And what I mean by that is you will always have in the back of your mind that there'll be something round the corner where he'll make a mistake and you'll be back to square one. That's going to be Philippe Clement at Rangers, unless there is an absolute miracle, and I don't see that happening. I go back to Gerrard, mate, right? And the big thing with Gerrard was sometimes the results weren't good. I remember a spell after beating Celtic at Parkhead just before COVID where you looked at their situation and went, this is a Rangers team that are going places, and then they had a bad run, but you saw enough to go that he's still the man long term. I still don't know what Philippe Clement's main system is, what he wants to do. I don't see patterns of playing enough in each game. I don't see a long-term situation where Philippe Clement can succeed.
No, me neither, mate. And I think part of the problem for that, you've touched on Gerrard, and okay, there were spells where that team could frustrate the hell out of you, to be fair, but you almost always saw some form of progression. Mm-hmm. Now, I think it's no coincidence that our best results come against Celtic, against your Spurs, etc. We are set up to play on the counter
Yeah.
attack, and unfortunately, that just isn't going to work domestically, other than Celtic and maybe a couple of others. So any good coach would then adapt their system to counter that. Clement doesn't. He just keeps doing the same things. And even the games where we have got good results, more often than not, it's a moment of individual brilliance as opposed to, a set system and tactics that lead to that goal.
Now, we will get into the board, and I'm never ever going to hold back the opportunity to bring up some of the board's faults, right? Because there are plenty of them we can bring up.
Uh-huh.
But there's plenty of problems here that are with Clement. And when he was appointed, I was very much a case of he's different to what they've looked at. He's not an ex-player. He's not somebody who's been at the club before and sold everybody that he was the mastermind behind winning the league, right? Which we knew was what was told. Giovanni Van Bronckhorst didn't have he didn't have that background of being an ex-player. And when we'd kind of heard who it was between, well, like Clement, he's won in Belgium. He was given a bad hand in France. There was certain sides of it you thought, right, he's the right guy, got the right start. I thought at the start said all the right things, said about how bad the fitness was, how bad the training was. And I'll be honest, Dave, I can't listen to him in a press conference anymore because I think he's at the stage where and I get with foreign managers, it's not always their first language, and I think some things can be misconstrued. But it's now at the stage where I just can't listen to him because I'm like, you're just waffling now.
Yep, 100%, mate. I'm actually exactly the same. More often than not, I'll quite often jump on and listen to the player interview. I tend not to bother with his because it annoys me. And I accept what you're saying about the language barrier, and that is going to be a factor to a certain extent. But there's plenty said that, and it's not the language barrier. Going on about budgets,
Yeah.
going on about playing youths and then not doing it. That's not us misunderstanding him. That's him telling us one thing and then doing something totally different.
It's that. I mean, it is that. It's like there are so many things you can say here. There's things he's bringing up, and I'm like, I don't really know what you're trying. What are you trying to tell us here? What are you saying about? Like you mentioned the Bailey Rice thing as well. Like he's not even in the bench today. And again,
Aye.
it's just are you just saying stuff just to try and get a wee bit of backing, but you're not following up on it. I mean, the one thing that got for me was a sports science thing. Like that was the one where I was like, because I've said for a while, right, and I've been very open about this. Rangers' record of injuries is not an accident. There is a deep problem at the club that's been going on for a long, long time. And I'm not overly against it's modern football. Sports scientists should have a say. But the thing that gets me is that he brought in Dowell and Dessers, and we all thought they're not going to do anything different than what they've done. And then he brought on the players who had said who had told him they needed a rest, and they played longer than the players he brought in to start. So you're basically saying, right, they're not fit enough to start, but because my plan here hasn't worked in the first half, I bring them on, and the way it worked out, they've played longer. So you're kind of contradicting yourself before you've even said what your defence is with this. So it's like there's clearly something, like there's clearly some sort of method, but there's not the purpose, there's not the forward planning to go, right, this is something they can stick to. Rangers haven't played a settled side for how long? And the one time he'd managed to kind of figure out that Danilo and Igamane works quite well together, he abandons it for whatever reason. Like, he's causing a lot of his own issues. Like, I can side with him that the board are ridiculous and the board are disgraceful, and we'll cover that in the next couple of minutes. But like, Gerrard would come out and say, this is what's going on, and you would be like, right, okay, I'm willing to give you the benefit of the doubt because there's a long-term plan. There's not that here.
No, and I think sometimes it's just excuses as well. So take this sports science thing as an example, right? This isn't Football Manager where you get an email once a week telling you the condition of these players, right? It's something that they constantly monitor.
Yeah.
And you mentioned forward planning. Well, surely forward planning, you can see these boys are coming to the kind of limits of what we should expect from them. So you drop one, give them a rest, then do another, then another, and you've got some sort of structure behind it. But he's basically changed half his team. It went belly up, which we all knew it was going to when we saw that lineup. And then said, "Oh, it was the sports science guys told me to do it." That's
Well,
nonsense.
then he ends up saying it was actually the players that came to him and said,
Aye,
"Oh, we need to
aye,
now," and I'm like, I don't really like that. I don't really like the
yeah,
fact that players are saying that, and you are like, can you not give? Like, I'm not saying obviously Rangers. What's went wrong in terms of like injuries has gone wrong. Like you play like Balogun have been a perfect example of that. Rushed him back and immediately gets injured again. Danilo was the same. He brought Danilo back and he gets injured a couple of weeks after getting back in. I just don't. I don't. I would love Philippe Clement to prove me wrong, right? And I'm
aye,
not. The way it's working out is that I mean, before we get into it, the 4 year contract in the summer was an absolute disgrace. It was purely to satisfy him because I don't think he was backed. I don't think he thought he was going to get as little as he got in the transfer window. And they did get money, to be fair, but I think just the way you mentioned downsizing, I think they had to trim that wage bill because it was so high and not delivering.
yeah. Yeah, and I said the other night on one of the journal pods, I actually think that is part of the reason that they're sticking by him.
Mm-hmm.
They've obviously signed him. We know from what was talked about in the summer that basically he was completely lied to by the board. They said one thing when they were hiring him, came into the summer, and it was a totally different story. So I think you're right. They've given him that contract to kind of try and mollify him a bit.
Yeah.
But the reverse of that is we are a club that's currently downsizing. Which top end manager are we expecting to come in and take that job? They're going to want certain guarantees, like Phil had when he took the job. Um, and they'll be very cautious because obviously, managers will have seen he's been burned by this. So they're not just going to take whatever the board say, hook, line, and sinker. So I think the fact that he said, "Well, okay, give me an extra year on my contract, and I'll stay and I'll oversee this," I think that's very appealing to the board, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, it's time we turn our attention to the board because I don't think we can bring up that it's all just on the field and it's all Clement. As much as I think Clement has been pretty inadequate recently, and again, like you don't pick up 13 points with 13 and 33 away and expect to be everything to be rosy, right? That's disgraceful. That's sackable in itself, right? Let's not kid
100%.
ourselves here. But the problems are deeper than Philippe Clement. The problems are. I put a tweet up the other night, and I've been saving it for a while because I know how uptight I can get about the board. Because on the one hand, I do think if it wasn't for the parts, if it wasn't for John Bennett, Rangers probably wouldn't have got through the
Mhm.
past 10 years. I think that's a valid assessment. The problem is, and we're seeing that now, yes, they've put money in, yes, they've stabilised the club. They're not very good at running the football operations, and we've seen that. And when you get to that stage, it's you either give up your stake in the club and sell it to someone else. Now that requires somebody to come in and take it, which I'm not necessarily sure is there at the moment, which is why I think they're still there and able to do what they're doing. Or you keep your stake in the club and you bring in somebody who can act on your behalf, who you know can handle football operations. Now, if you've got a lot of shares in a club, would you do that? But there's a track record now to say that the Parks they are not very good at this.
Yep.
So what do? They've brought in a CEO and a chairman, and again, you've got to give them time to get things right. We'll get into Patrick Stewart in a minute, but I think overall, like the Parks do, I think the Parks need to go. Maybe not need to go in terms of keeping money, keeping an investment in the club, but they
Yeah.
need to hand it over to someone who can act on their behalf, who can run the football operation side, who can be. I'm trying to think of the word. I think the word I'm looking for is something along the lines of a custodian on their behalf,
Aye.
something like
See.
that.
Yeah,
A
yeah.
proxy. That's exactly the word. because they're not very good at what they're doing at the moment.
No. I mean, ultimately, they need decision makers that, I mean, you said it yourself, that know what they're doing. And at the minute, these guys have got all the money, none of the knowledge when it comes to running a successful football club. They gave it a go. Fair enough. Probably not the best idea, but I guess they're entitled to. It's their money.
Mm-hmm.
But as you said, this isn't new.
There's enough of a body of work to
long.
say this hasn't worked. What we've done hasn't worked.
Exactly.
And I think the big issue is we've saw it at many clubs. We've seen it just off the top of my head, Man United, Everton, Newcastle. When you lose the fan base, you don't get them back. No matter what you do. Even Rangers under Murray, you don't get the fan base back once you disrespect them, once you treat them like not even customers, but treat them like kind of people that are just lining your pockets. That's kind of what's happening here, because now again the protest thing something we'll cover as well. I think that's quite important after today, but they've obviously picked Patrick Stewart and Fraser Thornton. Now Patrick Stewart's obviously someone, they're both fans of the club. That's the one thing I will say. They're both people who have had a background, who know what the best interests for Rangers are. I think because they're fans. But they need to be decisive. They need to act quickly. They need to look at this and go, I don't even think you need to look at a short term anymore. I think you need to look at where are we going to be in 2 years, in 3 years. Because right now, Rangers are... See if Patrick Stewart came out tomorrow and said, right, there's going to be a couple of years of pain here. We're going to be pretty rubbish on the park for 2 years, but we have a 2-3 year plan. I think a lot of fans would be... I would be on here screaming. I'm not saying that it would be like straight away. It would be like, oh, that's 2 seasons Celtic going to win the title. But I think in the back of your head, it would be right. Short term pain for long term gain. Yep. As long as there's a vision. I don't see a vision at the moment. I just see backwards. I just see them going backwards. I see the club regressing to a rate where it's not even that they're going to win a title in the next 2 years. I don't think they're going to challenge for one. I don't think they're in a position to chat. I think they're going to be a bang average second who can do quite well in Europe and maybe win a cup if Celtic are out of one. Like that's kind of, and that's a deeper issue. That's not Rangers Football Club.
No, it's not. And I think, I mean, obviously you've said we'll get on to Stuart's statement, but I think that was probably the one thing more than anything else from that did disappoint me was Wim saying that they're going to start a review on the football operation. I would have expected him to be
that should have been done.
Day one.
That should have been done before even.
Yeah,
that should have been done the minute Bisgrove left. That should have been done looking for a CEO. This 100%. Is what we need to do.
Yeah, and the fact that we've waited for him to come in and then 3-4 weeks after that, it just, again, it smacks of a club with direction.
I think the direction. I think there's a direction. I think it's a backwards one. I think that's the issue, and I don't know if it can get worse than it does, because, like, I remember, and I put this in a tweet as well. I remember round about 10 years ago, being outside Ibrox the day. I think it was the day of Mike Ashley securing a loan against Ibrox, and I remember turning to the person I was with saying, I didn't think it would ever get this bad. And I'm not saying it's at that stage, and it's not, like, I don't think that would ever happen again. But the fans are just sick of the fact that it's 10 years and there's no really much progress for that. I know there's a league title in there and things like that, but that was more an unbelievable set of circumstances. Now, when you look at it, that wasn't working towards that wasn't a long-term plan. That was a good manager, a good squad who was able to everything fell into place that season, and it hasn't been followed up on. I go back to that word launchpad. What's the launchpad been for that interview when Steven Gerrard sat in the East Enclosure?
Yeah.
Is this what we thought is this what it was going to be like 4 years ago? Is this where we should be seeing Rangers at?
I think what worries me more, okay, they didn't listen to Gerrard. But nobody's actually picked up between then and now how far we've regressed. We had that league, we had a European final, but since then it's been majoritively downhill. And it's taken till now, fans up and walking out on the 55th minute, for anyone to really have a wide ranging discussion about it.
You mentioned the Patrick Stewart briefing on Saturday. Now I was I was out on Saturday and I'd got a text from somebody who I think we're both we'll both know and we'll both have spoken to, and he said there's a briefing coming out for Patrick Stewart. Now my first thought was, right, are they pulling the trigger in Clement? Now that as soon as 2 minutes later that was said, it wasn't to be the case. But Patrick Stewart's briefing, I'm not going to read it word for word. I'm just going to pick up some of the kind of quotes in it and see what your kind of thoughts are, because there's a lot to unpack here. Now again, fair play to a couple of people who are in the press conference. I've heard what they've said, and I do think that they deserve a lot of credit for bringing stuff up that I didn't think they'd be able to. I didn't think they'd be allowed to. But one thing, the first Patrick Stewart thing is that they're siding with Clement. I think they don't want to make a change until the end of the season at the earliest, because not just I don't think the money, I don't think they want to spend, I don't think they want to do that. Now, I think they're in the habit that it's not worked the past 3 times they've changed manager. They've changed manager 3 times, maybe earlier than this, but we've seen it, but it's not worked. And I'm not saying keep Clement, because I don't think it's going to work long term. But the sacking the manager, bringing somebody in, getting a tune, and then it just bursts into smoke hasn't worked. So are they just going, right, let's just get to the end of the season? But by the end of the season, how bad can it get? Like, can it get any worse than it does right now?
Oh, like, aye.
Like,
you think about it, if Aberdeen hadn't fallen off a cliff the way you did, it would already be worse. We are probably quite fortunate the way they've collapsed. And you know what? I think most folk expected that they would have a drop off. But if it hadn't been to the extent that it has, then yeah, we could be in serious trouble for second. And that, I think, as toxic as today was to an extent, that would have been a whole different ballgame if we got to the end of the season in third.
Yeah, I mean, I go back to McLeish. McLeish finished third, and his time was up, and they didn't pull the trigger then because of kind of external factors. But these are some of the things that Patrick Stewart said. He said, I need to make some tough decisions. It comes with the role, but I'm committed to making the right ones for Rangers, not just the popular ones. I get that. I think sacking Clement tomorrow would appease the fan base to a degree, but you're also looking at it doesn't fix that exactly. It doesn't fix anything long term, right? Because the same people, now I get Patrick Stewart, but the same people in the background are going to be having a say in who this manager is. They've picked 4 or 5. One of them worked. And he got 3 years to make it work. Right? It was an extraordinary set of circumstances that Steven Gerrard was given time. And there was 2 reasons for that. The thing in the back of your mind about 10 in a row, which he was given that time and eventually worked out, and Dave King was in love with him, right? And I don't think there's nobody like Dave King, and I'm not saying bring Dave King back, but there's nobody in that boardroom who's going to have that level of power, right? Even Patrick Stewart won't have that level of power, right? Because he's still an external hire. Dave King put his own. Do you know what I mean? Dave King was calling the shots because he was the largest shareholder.
Yep.
Dave King's not really. I mean, that's another problem in itself. Is that the board, the main shareholders are all at war with each other. So there's no cohesion at the club. There's no structure behind Patrick Stewart to. Right, if Patrick Stewart kind of makes the wrong decisions, who's there to rein Patrick Stewart in?
Nobody, or certainly nobody with a clue.
Exactly, and Patrick Stewart obviously has said we're also all frustrated. In particular, if I look at the away results, the record is there. It's been discussed. It's not good, and it's not what's expected of Rangers. So we're working with Philippe to address consistency issues, and I'm also not going to speculate on what happens if results don't improve. Again, when he's saying that, I haven't heard that. I've just read what he said. what I've heard of him so far has been quite positive.
Mm-hmm.
But because the mood is so low, if there's not decisive action taken through default, he'll get a large portion of the blame. That might be unwarranted, but at the moment, he's now the face of the club.
Yeah.
So all the heat will now go on him.
Aye, that's it, mate. I mean, he's got a very good reputation win
Yeah.
the game, especially down south. But ultimately, as fans, we kind of have an awareness of what goes on off the field. We have a bit of a casual interest. Our priority is always going to be what's happening on the field.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you're saying we're working with Philippe to address consistency issues. What does that actually mean?
Yeah.
What work are you doing with him that is going to address consistency issues? The only one that can fix that is Clement and the players, not the CEO. So I get he's got to say something, and it's probably about as good as he could have put it if they've made the decision to stick with him. But if you dig into it a bit, it is still slightly word salad for me.
Word salad's interesting because I would perfectly sum up Clement at times with what he's been saying. But the thing with Patrick Stewart is that he's clearly not thinking about May 2025. He should be thinking about May 2027, 2028.
Yeah.
Because if this lumbers on for as long, do you know what I mean? He's not going to be there because the fans will turn on him the way they've turned on Clement. What's success at the end of this season, right? Because the league's gone, right? I'm not talking about just on field. I'm talking about how does Rangers kind of end this season in a positive note?
Honestly, I think long term it comes down to the squad building, getting that right. Could we win a cup? Aye, maybe not. But is that actually a massive achievement? Not especially. The bread and butter is the league, and as you say, that's gone. So I think for me, it's about getting a system in place between this window and the summer window, getting a team in place that is actually in a position where they can make that challenge next season. Because, to be honest, I mean, there's some good players in there, but as a squad, we're nowhere near it at the minute.
That's the big difference and that's where squad building is an issue.
Aye.
There's a few players I think like Raskin's been tremendous since he kind of get his run back in the side. I think there's certain diamonds like Jeffy, I think can be a big player. I think Diamande, there's something there. Czerny's been very good. I think Bayrami, yes, has been quite inconsistent, but there's a player there. And I think in a right structure, Danilo's been good. I want to save Igamane for later, all right, because I think he's the one diamond in this pile of muck at the moment. But there's a decent squad there. Barron, I think, is potential for the future, but it doesn't work. Like the bench, for example, like he's still. I don't want to pick. I'm not picking in Dessers. I'm a wee bit, but he's done. He's not good enough. He has to be moved on for the simple reason that you have to cut this now. You have to give fans something. You have to look at long term. Rangers need to forget about this season. That's why, even after the Dundee United game, I remember coming on the pod and saying, if the plug is pulled in Clement now, this is before Patrick Stewart was hired. If the plug is pulled, bring an interim in. Because this season's a write-off. Not in terms of, right, let's just let it free fall and be, fourth in the league and everybody's, do you know what I mean? Like, Europe's an issue. I mean more, you can't keep going to this, let's just sack and bring a manager in and we're here again in 12 months. But you also need to have a wee bit of excitement for going forward. I think loans, I don't think there's a lot there to bring in. There maybe be enough to bring in one, but I think it's going to be loans for January. I think you need to look at these games and fin out at the end of the season and be looking at, right, let's just forget about any sort of run.
Aye.
Much as that pains me to say, you need to look ahead to next season already. And it pains me to say that. That's how bad this is.
Yeah.
This season's a whitewater.
This season, the
Europe,
objective is second, isn't it? And something decent in Europe. Maybe a cup if we can, but we're not going to win this season. We can't now. We're too far behind.
On to the game today, St Johnstone, obviously 3-1 win, pretty fast start. Do you know what I mean?
Aye.
Like, I thought first 30 minutes Rangers were good, got the goals, and that was it. St Johnstone are exactly where they are. They're bottom of the league and probably going down. But I think from what could have been it was a wee bit of toxic afternoon, but I think it was calmed by the fact that Rangers got the kind of job done early.
Yeah, I think it was. I think my criticism would be after that third, like you said, we had that 25, 30 minutes. After that, we just almost kind of seemed to stop.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I seen post match, Clement's sort of basically said because of the walkout and all the toxicity, that's why he didn't do it. But I think the other bugbear I've got on this game is why is there no youth on the bench? Why are you bringing on C Diddy and Dowell into these games? Aye, it just doesn't make any sense. As we've said, I think all Rangers fans know that neither of those has a future at this club, whether that's this window, the summer window, who
I
knows?
really don't get the Kieran Dowell thing, right? Because
Aye.
for two reasons. Number one, I think he's squad. I think he's a squad player at best.
Mm-hmm.
And number two, how many times has he played him and taken him off?
Aye.
Like,
Aye.
he's
He's
not.
just there. He
Yeah,
doesn't do anything good. He just floats about the pitch, really.
and you're never like the youth thing frustrates me because like you will get fans who'll be like, all right, where's Bailey Rice, where's Zach Lovelace? Then when they actually play, they're like, oh, if we not get any better than him. That's an issue, but
Aye.
I get why fans are like that because they haven't seen enough youth players coming through.
Yeah.
That's the issue. It's not down to the players. It's because we haven't seen it over the years. Like there's a training centre that was built in 2002 that's produced a handful of talent.
Aye.
So that hasn't delivered on what it was meant to be, right? So that's an argument for another day. Like there's not a lot of youth players good enough for the squad, and the reason for that is that they haven't been given enough opportunity. We don't know where they're at. Like I'm a massive fan of Bailey Rice, but I'm not necessarily sure Bailey Rice is going to come in there and work at this moment because I think it's too bad a situation. Leon King's different. Leon King's had opportunities, and I don't think Leon King's good enough to be a Rangers first team player. Right? I think the evidence is there to say that. Finlay Curtis, Paul and CO, Zach Lovelace to a degree, even players like Cole McKinnon, right? Robbie Fraser as well. I know they're both out on loan, but these are players that have made a good impression anytime they've been in the squad. These are players that have impressed, right? But you only get better if you get opportunities, right? And the argument to it is that there's nobody there in front of them that's miles ahead. Like, do you know what I mean? There's nobody like I'm not looking at that Rangers team going, oh, they're irreplaceable.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's youth there. I mean, Fraser might have a good opportunity, but they play against Fraser, but then you maybe don't see them again for 4 or 5 months.
That's it. And yeah, you've got folk, as I say, like Sadao.
Like Sadao and Dessers,
that
yeah.
litter that bench, take up space. When we're trying to see games, we do give them the minutes. Why not give those kind of 5-10 minutes to Bailey Rice, Archie Stevens, whoever it may be?
Stevens, yeah.
The opportunity is there, and I would actually argue today is the exact kind of game where you would be looking to give these guys a bit of a run out. 3-0, nice and early. Fine, see it till half time. Okay, start the second half. Then 55, 60 minutes, you look at bringing one of these guys
That's the thing. That's the thing. These are the subs that come on today, right?
Huh?
Dessers for Igamane after 65 minutes. Dessers. I kind of know where he's at. Cortez for Cherny, fine. Okay with that. I think Cortez needs minutes, and I think there's a player there. McCausland for Hadji. I think McCausland is okay. I think he's a second choice. Again, I'm maybe contradicting myself a bit here, but I think there's still parts of his game. I think in better circumstances he would need a loan, right? I think he was thrown in and still a wee bit behind, but in Dowell on for Danilo, again, kind of Bailey Rice or somebody will come on there.
Aye.
King for Yilmaz. I think King is just probably no good enough. And There's nothing wrong with that. I can see Leon King being a very good SPFL player. I just don't think it's for Rangers.
Yeah,
Like,
I'd agree with that.
you can take Dessers and Dowell off. You don't need Dessers and Dowell there. Matondo, I think Matondo, try and get him moved on. But again, that leads to a bigger problem. Some of the contracts are ridiculous. Who's going to buy Rabbi Matondo when the money is on? Things like that.
It's not so much who's going to buy him, who's going to pay him anything close to what we're paying him.
And the situation's totally in the player's court because he's like, well, I can sit on the bench here and make what I'm making. There's no skin off my nose. It's deeper problems. There are positives though. I know it's pretty depressing, but if you're listening to Rangers podcast at the moment, you're probably coming in with that mentality that that's what it's going to be. But I want to touch on maybe one or two positives. One of those positives is the form of Hamza Igamane. Now, there's a couple of things about Igamane that I'm really impressed with. I think number one, the fact that he's, again, we've seen today with his goal, I think he's a very, very underrated finisher. I think his finishing ability is very, very good. And the second thing is, and I think this is important for the fan base, he's a likeable player. He's a likeable personality. And I'm not saying he's not like Morelos in terms of his ability, right? He's nowhere near Morelos. But he's that kind of cult figure you kind of want to get behind, you want to be successful. The one thing I will say is, though, to Rangers fans, enjoy him while he's here, because if this board have not learned a lesson that they need to cash in on prize assets as soon as they possibly can, then they need to start. Then if Rangers let Igamane roll down his contract, I think I'll set a fire outside Ibrox. Because that's the issue.
Join you.
That's been an issue.
Yeah.
Morelos should have been sold. Kent should have been sold. Igamane's like a rotter. You've got to hand it to Coppin and Clement for getting him in. And I know people were saying, it was 1.7 million that could have been better spent at the time. If this boy gets maybe 10, if this boy is able to go for 10, 15 million, I'm hoping for more. But I think everybody will be delighted with that.
Yeah. I mean, it's proper smart business. I mean, we always talk about a player trading model. That's literally the prime example of it. You unearth that raw talent, you give them a platform. The fact we've got European participation kind of maximizes that platform. And then, as you say, year and a half of them, you sell them.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty gutting to see a player like that go, but I think that's just the reality of where we are in the football pyramid, if you will, being in Scotland.
Yeah, I mean, it is a case to enjoy him while he's here, in my opinion. Raskin's been a positive.
Yes.
He came in, obviously, I don't think the manager really fancied him, which I wasn't really sure why, because I was not saying there's nepotism there of because he's a Belgian international, he should be given a bit more time. I think there's been a player there for a while. It's just been trying to fine tooth comb him, and I think he's absolutely finding it now.
Yep.
I hope he's a future captain because he's shown the best impression. But again,
I like Raskin, and I think he's done all right as captain. One thing I would say, and this applies to a couple of bits, you're talking about Raskin getting his chance. He got his chance and he seized it through injury. And it's just another example. Most of what we have done good this season has been almost kind of stumbled into trying things and seeing if it hits the wall, so to speak.
I was going to say, before we get into Aberdeen, what do we think Rangers need for the January window? I think on a good day, probably everything. But I think of centre back's obviously a necessity, right? You can't go through. Proper hasn't worked out. Now I think I maybe not know this, but I'm quite a Dutch football enthusiast. Robin Proper is very, very good for the Dutch league. I think we've seen very early on he's not cut out for Scottish football. I think we'll see Robin Proper be a very, very decent player. If he goes back to Holland, he's just not cut out for Scotland. And we've seen it in the past. The one I always go to was Cardozo, who was pretty average in Scotland, goes and plays for Porto and Benfica. You can just be not cut out for this league, right? It happens. But I think Hinshalla's been okay the first two games, but I don't think I think he's a long-term kind of project.
Yeah.
I think Rangers are very, very light in defence.
Mm-hmm.
with injuries are obviously the reason for that, but I think you maybe need one or two. Now I'm happy just with a couple of loans to get through the season, but centre back's a big area to cover for me.
Yeah, I think even before the kind of injuries, centre back was always the one I pulled out whenever anyone talk about transfers because I think we're light anyway. I love Leon Balogun as a player. I think he's brilliant, but we know he can't
It's
sustain
another
matches
long-term
every
issue
three,
that
4 days.
Leon
Yeah,
Balogun's your reliable option. Now, I'm not saying
aye,
Leon Balogun's a bad player, but he was a squad. He should be a squad option. He
yeah.
should be there if
To come in and
yeah.
cover bases,
He
not
shouldn't be the one you're needing
the
cover
main
for.
man. Yeah, exactly. So I think for me, a centre back, Wim saying one or two. If we could get a second, I would say another six. Because I think if Raskin takes another injury, we're in a world of trouble there. Don't get me wrong, Barron is a potential, but
Yeah.
I don't think he's at Raskin's level in that kind of the way that Clement wants
Yeah.
what his six to play. So I think for me, it would be a centre back and a six.
And obviously as well, let's just hope that injuries kind of stay solid at the time being because there's a lack of positives. But there's like Igamane's final form. Danilo I thought was good, and Danilo's been good since he came back in. To be honest,
Yeah.
like I would Danilo and Igamane to me, you have to find a way to make those two play together. Czerny I think is yes he's not always in top form performance wise, but I think he's one of the very few players in there. Like maybe a Seamer of last season, he'll always maybe get you something. He's always the one I would kind of hang your hat to maybe get you out of trouble. I think this might be controversial. If the money's there, I would get him. I think for the simple reason that I think there's enough there. I think there's enough of a body of work there to go. Right, he can be a long term prospect for 2 or 3 seasons. He'll get you goals. He'll get you numbers. Rangers' biggest problem is the right batsman top goal scorer for the last 3 4 years. Right,
Yep.
probably not going to happen this season. Right, and that maybe it's bit. I still think your top goal scorer is maybe going to get you what 15, 20.
Mm-hmm.
Right, unless Igamane or Danilo have freak ends the season, which is possible. But I think realistically, we're looking at a spread of goals as opposed to like a real out and out goal scorer. I think Czerny's only one outside the Danilo and Igamane who'll get you good numbers.
Yeah, and that's been a problem in our squad for a long time, as we have just relied on one or two individuals. You think, Buff, Tav, how long were they always one of them? And when they weren't on form, or when Buff was suspended, as often happened at the start, then suddenly we were struggling. Whereas if you can get those goals through the team, it means you're not reliant on one individual. I think with Czerny, my question would be, what's the fee? I think if it was reasonable, then yeah, I would like to sign him. If it's the reported 7 million,
like if that's
it.
down to a good negotiator in there. Maybe try to do that, and that's what I'm hoping that Rangers maybe have. But a big game on Wednesday night, Aberdeen at home. Now, probably two sides that are consistently inconsistent at the moment.
Aye.
One thing about it is though Rangers are at home. Aberdeen are what I think they've won in 11 games. Rangers are pretty much flawless at home so far this season.
Mm-hmm.
I think the fans need a big result like that. I think the manager certainly needs a big result and performance. But if it was me, if I was Clement, and again I'm not Clement because I don't think I waffle, to be honest. I think sometimes I'm a bit incoherent, but I don't think I waffle too much.
Aye.
But the one thing I will say is that I think today was okay. I would keep that team, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, it depends what's available at centre back, but I think Propalantiala's probably fine now. I think Ridvan was okay today. I think Jeffy was okay today as well. But I would keep things going today like this and hopefully try and just get a bit of positivity going.
So I think my biggest concern, and I said this after the Old Firm, in fact, I said this the week before the Old Firm, but I was one of the few in our wee group chat that actually expected us to win that Old Firm. And I said it at the time, as I watched this, we'll win the Old Firm convincingly, and then we'll drop points to Hibs. Now, We're at home against Aberdeen, another big game. They may well come at us a bit. I think we'll actually do all right against Aberdeen.
I think
My,
Rangers will beat Aberdeen.
my
It's
problem is what comes after that,
yeah,
and will we get that level of consistency?
yeah, and like if I was to ask you, kind of before we kind of wrap up, I think Rangers will beat Aberdeen. I actually think Rangers have got a more of a chance of getting a result at Old Trafford than they do against Dundee United the game
Yep.
after. Like that's kind of how bad it is at the moment.
Sad but true.
Yeah, but if Clement's going to see out the season, right, which I think he will,
Aye.
regardless, how does he get the fans back? I don't think he does. I'll just say that off the bat. But if there's a small glimmer that he can, how does he do it?
I think it's got to start with the away form. He's got to arrest the results that we're seeing when we go away from home against these smaller teams. Because at the minute, I mean, as I said at the top, he's got a massive budget compared to these. You should expect by default. I know people say, oh, you shouldn't just expect your team to win. Well, I'm sorry. When we're spending 10 times what these guys are spending, of course you should expect your team to win. It's not unreasonable. Now, we all know there'll be off days and it won't always happen. It's the regularity that's happening with at the minute. You look at the away form and it's, what is it, 13 out of 33?
13 out of 33, yeah. Three wins, a draw out of 11 games.
I mean, that is absolutely horrendous. I mean, half the teams in this league would be looking at their manager after that kind of form, let alone a Rangers manager.
Yeah, I mean, it's 3 wins, 4 draws out of 11 games. So 3-4, aye. And the problem I've got as well is that 2 of those games, the Dundee United game, they limped 1-0 away from home. The Ross County game's a 3-0 away win. Can't remember the other one. Was it Motherwell? I can't remember what the other one was. But they've just limped through games this season.
Yeah.
Like that's the issue. Like they're just not very good. They're not. Yeah. It's not a good Rangers team.
And when you do go behind, there's nothing in you that thinks, "Oh, it's all right."
That's how I felt. That's how I felt on Thursday. It was Rangers go behind early. The one thing I was saying all day was if Rangers concede early, it's like
it's going to be a long night.
It's going to be a long night. And the one thing is as well, like I really enjoyed the first half hour against Hibs. Really enjoyed what I thought they were really, really good. Well, I thought the pressing was really good, and then they kind of lost a goal and then just seemed to get spooked.
Yep.
And it's like how I don't get. I don't. If anybody or the low in confidence have just Chris Boyd said it. They've just beat Celtic 3-0. That should be enough to go right. I always say you need to go on a run. They've not done that. They've not. It's been just
2 steps forward, 3 back.
And that's what I'm saying about the Harry Maguire syndrome, as I call it. Even if Rangers were to win 3 or 4 in a row, you would just be back to square one the minute was another back. You're just waiting for the next issue, and that's kind of Rangers at the moment. But Dave, I apologise, it's not been the best subject, but I thoroughly appreciate you coming on.
No, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure, Scott.
And we will be back. We'll be doing the post-match videos after all the kind of games. We'll start with that on Wednesday night against Aberdeen, but we'll have player ratings as well, with historical content. That'll all be going out on the Rangers assessment. Thank you very much, everyone. We'll see you all soon.